We're now live, so I'll pass you over to the chair. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Cabinet meeting. I will ask Lynn if she can do the roll call. Lynn, please.
Right, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Dalston.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Kia.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Hi Lynn, I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mills.
Hi Lynn, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Nicholson.
Yes, I'm here, Lynn.
Thank you. And Councillor Mrs Scott.
Yes, obviously I'm here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lynn.
We have
the officers.
Yeah, we have a number of other members in attendance. We have Councillor Curry.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smedker.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Tate.
Yes, I'm also here.
Thank you. We also have Councillor Cindy Hughes.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'll be speaking to item 8. I'll be asking a question just for clarity.
Right, thank you. Councillor Body indicated he was going to attend, but he isn't here yet. So I'll just go over to officers. We've got Paul Wildsmith, Managing Director.
Good evening.
Hi, and Ian Williams.
Good evening.
Hiya, and James Stroyan.
Good evening, Lynn.
Hiya, and Elizabeth Davison.
Hello, Lynn.
Hi, and Luke Swinhoe.
Good evening, everybody.
Right, thank you. I'll pass you back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I can't see any. Just before we go into the main part of the agenda, I want to make a comment with regard to locomotion number 1. As a result of comments made by Councillor Wallace and Councillor Body, I wish to make the following statement. This issue was never a party political matter, and the leader of the Labour group and the leader of the Liberal Democrats were involved from the very beginning. We also had the support of their 2 leaders in Parliament. Legally, we had no option but to accept the terms of the agreement and obtain a new memorandum of understanding that ensured we would have loco number 1 for the 2025 celebrations and beyond. The leaders of both of these parties accepted the new agreement, and that is recorded in the notes of the meeting. So if these 2 councillors have issues, it is with their own leadership and not with me. If this continues to be a party political issue, it could jeopardise the 2025 celebrations, and that will be a disaster for Darlington. We all work together in the spirit for the benefit of the people of Darlington, and I hope that these 2 councillors can accept that and we can move forward. 2025 is a major issue for all of the people of Darlington, and I think we've got to make the best of it. And that's all that I want to say. Thank you. We can move on to item 3 to hear relevant representatives from members of the general public. And as Councillor Cindy Hughes has said, she would like to ask a question on item number 8. Councillor Body indicated he wanted to ask a question on 7B, but as I understand, Lynn, he's still not here. So we'll just have to wait and see whether he arrives or not. Item number 4, to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet held on Tuesday, the 9th of February 2021. Can I ask members of Cabinet, do they accept these minutes as a true record? Can I have somebody to move them, please? Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
I'll second them.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Item number 5, matters referred to Cabinet. There are no matters referred back to Cabinet. Item number 6, issues arising from scrutiny. There are no issues arising from scrutiny. So we now move on to item number 7. Number 7A, Councillor Keir.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to, before I proposed, the local transport plan. I'd like to thank officers for providing the very detailed plan, highlighting what we've achieved over the past year, the effect of COVID on our plan and what we would like to achieve going forward. The purpose of the report provides members with an annual update on the highway and transport from a regional and local perspective. It outlines the delivery performance and public satisfaction in 2021 and seeks approval for the 2021-22 programme, including the release of funding. It also provides an update on the Tees Valley Strategic Transport Plan and the Darlington Transport Plan. Therefore, I propose the recommendations detailed in section 18 for the reasons stated in section 19. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions to Councillor Keir? Councillor Snedker.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a very interesting report, and I'd like to offer my support for a number of the points in this plan, particularly with reference to the town centre. I can see that the plan has been updated and modernised to take into account the changing use of town centres and the hope that we have a more balanced mix between residential and retail and entertainment in the centre of our town, like other parts of the country are seeing this shift as well. So I particularly would like to support the need for a cross-town cycle route, but one that doesn't interfere with walking. I would like to support the idea of a town centre car club, the idea that transport is a service for people living in particularly dense conditions in town centres where you don't have to buy a car and maintain it, but you can buy by the hour, hire by the hour a car through a car club. I think that's a very forward-looking policy. And so a number of those were very positive. What I would like to see in future plans, and I hope that Councillor Keir and I will have these discussions going forward, is how we put in place the quite clear messages coming from central government, such as the message from, or the speech from Grant Shapps, which says he expects half of all trips within built-up areas to be walked or cycled by 2030. It's 9 years away. And I would hope that our transport plans start having some measures in, some metrics in, which measure how far along the route we are towards that measure, as requested by Grant Shapps. And of course, Boris Johnson, a keen cyclist himself, had some very supportive words to be said on this. He said, I believe, councils should, and in his inimitable style, crack on and implement these schemes. So a very good, positive report, and I hope that we can work together to make it even better going forward. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor.
Harker. I'll take all the questions, Andy, and then you can read. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Some similar comments to Councillor Snedker. And I think officers are particularly to be commended. It's clear from the reports that funding for the local transport plan is very complicated. It's a mix of formulaic allocations and bids, and officers do need to be commended for navigating through such a complex mishmash of funding opportunities. It's the bidding part that I think is problematic in terms of what this local authority needs to do and the ambitions that it has to improve our infrastructure. Any form of competitive bidding makes it very difficult for an authority to have long-term plans that it can map out with any certainty in terms of timescales of the things that it wants to achieve. And if we look in paragraph 77, where the headlines are given in terms of the funding schemes for this and next year, it's quite clear that a big proportion of our funding is actually competitive bidding, and underlines the point that it does make it very difficult for future planning. And in particular, I just wanted to draw attention to the commendable scheme that's being currently consulted on along Woodland Road to encourage more active travel, in particular cycling and walking. As we will see in that paragraph, the funding for it is immense. It's £1 million with a hope that that will go up to, I think, £1.7 million. Now further work has been done on it. Assuming we do get the additional funding of £1.7 million, then it's, from my calculations, around 35% of the LTP next year, which, given it's a a lovely add-on to have. It's not basic maintenance, it's improvements to the network. That's a huge proportion of that transport plan that's based on a bid that we aren't guaranteed to getting year on year. Because of the cost, unfortunately, the initial stage is only a third of a mile long, and I think it's about a mile from the centre of town to Cockerton. So we need another 3 years of that. It's probably 2 miles to get us to the edge of town along Woodland Road. And if we bear in mind that we have probably 4, maybe 5 roads that we'd wish to do some similar scheme in terms of the major routes into town centre. On the current progress, unfortunately, we are looking at a decade, maybe 2 decades before we can roll that scheme out across the town. And as I said, it is commendable. It clearly has, in words, the support of government, but if we are to progress it much more quickly, and I would argue that we do, government does need to be much more forthcoming with funding for those schemes, because clearly on this basis, we are at the behest of bids that we've got no certainty of winning, even if indeed money is put forward for bids. So I would ask Councillor Kerr to do what he can to pass the message back to government that to enable schemes such as this to go ahead with much greater speed and with much more certainty, government does need to make a commitment to stump up the cash far more quickly than the initial scheme would suggest that they're going to do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you. I was looking at the continuation, retain the bus route through the town centre, and the comments that it's other traffic that causes the problems. Can we keep that on review? Because I know there's been a lot of near accidents that haven't been reported, and I've witnessed a few of them. But there has been one fatality on the junction with Crown Street, where it turns down that area. That can get very congested with buses and can cause some problems. So can we review that at some stage in the near future, just to make sure that that build-up of buses doesn't cause wider circling for the buses to come round that corner onto Crown Street, where the accident happened that caused the fatality?
Thank you. I haven't got any more hands up, so Councillor Kerr, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Snedker, yeah, I think it's an admirable aim, and I think we'll be looking at what we can do to see what we can do to achieve that. I think there'll be consultations all around, but as Councillor Harker alluded to, with the new regulations around cycle routes, you can see the cost of doing it as per the new regulations, etc. It is quite a hefty cost to do that, but nonetheless I think it's an admirable aspiration to go through that, and I think that would be the aim, is to work through that and see how we can achieve that. I think there is probably ties in with Councillor Curry's question as well around the town centre. I think we need to we are reviewing that in light of a request that came up through the scrutiny committee about the town centre recycling and pedestrians, and how we move forward with that in the future. And of course that ties hand in glove with what we're going to be doing with the town centre in the future as well. So as things change, as Councillor Snedker says, there are big changes in there. We need to be quick enough and flexible enough and nimble enough to reflect in our town centre transport plan how we can accommodate best getting people to the areas they want to get to with the least amount of conflict areas, whether you're travelling on a bus, whether you're in a car, whether you're cycling or whether you're walking. So that is the intent of the town centre part. So your question, Councillor Curry, yes, we will be keeping that under constant review as the town centre starts to change, particularly as we come out of COVID and we start to see what other things we're going to be doing in the town centre when events come on again, etc., etc. Councillor Harker, you're absolutely correct. The bidding process is complicated. I think, to be quite fair, I think the officers do a good job with the funding, but all of this approval work, improvement work and active travel is dependent on funding, and we will be doing our utmost to get there the best bids as much as possible. And again, as bids come through, we'll be making folks aware of where those routes are, but the intent is to have a town centre that is vibrant, and that the transport plan going to and through the town centre reflects the needs of the town centre and the people. So I think that's the long-term view that I have with this. So all of our plans will be designed around that, and I think it's a good document, this one, because it does set that sort of a premise out for us, and I take on board what you're saying on the things, and we will see how we can manage through this year. As things change, we'll keep you abreast of what's going on, particularly as we come out of COVID with the what's happening in the town centre in respect to transport. If you have any questions at any time or anything else you want to ask, please drop me a note, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. It's been moved and seconded. Can we agree? Thank you. Item 7B, Councillor Kerr again.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go into the report, I'd just like to say a few words. The original decision to upgrade the crematorium was passed in the Cabinet report on the 8th of October 2019. The reasons within that report, which is attached to this Cabinet report, were to select option 3 of the options that were available at the time. The Cabinet passed that option 3 approval then, and that was after scrutiny had also approved option 3 as the preferred option on the 12th of September 2019. I don't think the options are up for review again. This report, which is the 9th of March report, it is brought to the Cabinet to highlight significant cost increase to deliver the crematorium project, and that's primarily due to COVID delay and material cost increases. Nonetheless, the original reasoning to select and deliver option 3 through the previous Cabinet report still hold true. There is no difference to those that decision that was made or the options that were there. So that original reason still holds true. In the meantime, because of the cost increase, officers are doing a value engineering review to understand where and if costs can be reduced without compromising quality. There are positive in the interest rates effects that keep the funding required within the financial boundary that I think Elizabeth can answer if any questions are asked. We do have a couple of critical items where we have a time constraint with the project. We need to complete the project in the next fiscal year, not to be penalised in a VAT concession that happens. And the main reason that we were making this move with the cremators is that the cremators themselves are beyond the expected life, and repairing them, keeping them going, I think is very critical just now, and we really need to do that upgrade as quickly as possible. So with that being said, I would like to go with the purpose of this report, which is to bring the Cabinet's attention to the increase in costs to deliver the crematorium refurbishment and the new chapel project. And I would like to move the recommendations in section 3 for the reasons that are outlined in section 4. And I'll propose that.
I think Councillor Mrs Scott's lost connection, so if we can just hold the meeting for a moment, we'll try and reconnect her.
And then
Right, what we've adjourned the meeting for a moment. Do you need us to go over any of that? Councillor Kay just finish his introduction.
no, I don't know. That's fine. Yes,
Right.
I mean, obviously I knew what. Yes, that's fine. I'm sorry. Hopefully it won't happen again.
Right. that's fine. We'll start again, and I think Councillor Body's in the meeting now as well. So I'll
Right.
just give us a
Yeah.
minute and I'll let you know. Are we live, Jill? Yeah, we've started again. So can I just pass over to you, Chair?
Councillor Keir, do you want to continue? Have you finished, Joe? Yeah.
Chair,
Right, I've got-
Chair, I moved the report based on the recommendations in 3 for the reasons given in 4.
And has it been seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure who put the hands up first. Councillor Snedker or Councillor Harker?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I think the increase in costs here are substantial, and most of that has been taken up by the predicted materials costs caused by a combination of Brexit and COVID, I believe. I've talked to people in the building trade, and they've seen a marked increase in many different materials, as well as problems with getting skilled labour as well. So those costs are very much regrettable, but I struggle to see what possibly we could have done as a council to mitigate or avoid those. I know officers work very hard to keep contracts on track. Councillor Keir did mention about decisions having already been made and papers attached to this report that had already been discussed before. However, it would be you wouldn't expect me to not miss the fact that the report mentions in 5 different areas an exit through Ponfield Close. Now, it was my understanding that due to the contract that is signed between the allotment holders and the council, putting a road through there isn't a possibility, and that had been ruled out. And so what I'm seeking from Councillor Keir is an assurance that although there are 5 references to a road through Ponfield Close, and it's a subject that's raised with me regularly by residents in that part of town, that road isn't back on the agenda, that it's just a legacy that it's mentioned in the papers, and that there is no intention to have a road out through the allotments and through Ponfield Close in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harker?
Thank you, Chair. A question and a comment. In the report, and I think you alluded to the phrase, Councillor Keir, it uses the expression value engineering, which is sometimes a euphemism for reducing costs. I'm not quite sure in the report whether you're just indicating that because it's coming now to trying to implement the scheme that officers have had to spend time looking at it and recosting it, whether it's just simply you're talking about the fact that they have recosted it, or whether in using that phrase, in doing that process, they've also managed to mitigate some of the increase in costs by altering the scheme in any sense. So I just wanted to get an understanding of whether the 1.5 million is effectively, it would have been more had officers not done some work to reduce some of those additional costs that they've since discovered. So that's the question. And the comment really is just adding on to what's previously been said. I mean, clearly, I think I worked out it's about a 30% increase in cost, which is a big proportion. And I suppose the worry is that this is just the first scheme that's been restarted post-COVID, and whether there'll be other capital schemes that we're going to see similar increases in costs, and whether that's going to produce financial problems more widely for the local authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Body, I understand that you want to ask a question on the report. So over to you. And as I say, it's a question that you're putting to Councillor Keir.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I just wanted to ask the councillor if he was aware that Kirkleatham built a new crematorium for £3.5 million very recently, and had he given any consideration to the fact that if you were to offer 1,400 shares at £2,500 each, you could raise that £3.5 million from the private sector, from private investors, to fund a new crematorium on a new site. I understand from council officers that we get in 1.5 million a year in revenue for cremation.
Councillor Body, can I just interrupt you? Councillor Keir made it quite clear at the beginning that we weren't looking at the options. We're actually looking at the increased costs. The option that we're going with is the one that was approved by Cabinet earlier. So all we're looking at now is the increased costs on this particular development. So can you ask the question on that item only?
Okay, well, I'll be happy to address you in relation to the project itself. I'm greatly reassured to learn that the new cremators will be cremators which will capture mercury in the cremation process. And I'm greatly reassured to learn that there'll be no overall interruption in services because of the way the cremators are due to be replaced. And I'd just like to commend the work of the staff in relation to those two very important issues for the project moving forward.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, Councillor Keir, would you like to answer to the questions? You're on mute, Andy.
Yes, I'll take them as they came up. I think Councillor Snedker, yeah, material costs have gone through, and I certainly don't know if it's Brexit or if it's just COVID, but certainly I think when the prices that were made or the cost that was done, the costing that was done for this, we're just going back into lockdown as well. So I take it there's a huge amount of risk management in there by the suppliers as well around additional costs in there. So yeah, it's the costs for building materials in general are pretty high. I mean, 20% is not an unusual number, and the costs obviously once the builders start to add on risk for people for transport and that type of thing, that's going up to the 30% that Councillor Harker alluded to. So those costs were done when we were at a very, I would say, pessimistic time, you know, when we were going back into lockdown and we had Europe was going into lockdown, the US, Brazil, all of the big global countries were all going back into lockdown other than China. So those costs, when we say re-engineering, it's some of that. Councillor Harker, it's the key thing is that we do not lose quality, but I don't think there's been any re-engineering or cost reduction part done as that yet. I think the initial what has been done is looking at the costs that came in and see if there are alternatives, suppliers, for example, to try and reduce those costs, see how costs have changed over the piece. But certainly they will be looking at some re-engineering, and that will be ongoing, and I'll be pushing hard on that because that's clearly something that we want to try and reduce and minimise as much as possible without that compromise in quality. So that'll always be the remit for me when I'm speaking to officers around the quality side of it. How can we be sure that we're keeping that quality in there? Nonetheless, it was a shock to everybody, just the extent of the increase. So I think going forward, I think that the costs will be looked at under severe scrutiny, and I'll be pushing the officers to explain what we can actually do to reduce those costs. On Pondfield Close, Councillor Snedker, there are no plans just now to look at a road through Pondfield Close. As far as I'm concerned, this is as it was before. It's no changed any. You're correct. It's legacy from the previous one, and I think in the planning meeting, I don't know if you're at the planning meeting, it certainly wasn't discussed there. So at this stage, I have no knowledge of that happening. Councillor Body. Yep, I think we've got to modernise. I think the mercury limits are set by government, and I think we've got to make sure that this new building is an opportunity for us to bring it into a setting that's with the current legal and aesthetic conditions, that we can make it as best as possible for the residents of Darlington. And the phased in approach will still have to come in so that the build is within a year, so we don't have that hit that we would get in VAT that were enjoying if we get the building in that year. So it's going to be a tight programme, but I think we've got to go for the reasons that were previously listed. And I think I would appreciate if everybody, if you could support this, because I think it's a much needed uplift to the crematorium.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. It has been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item number 8, supporting the Childhood Health Weight Plan. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to gain Cabinet approval to commence the review of the available planning powers that could be used to support the Council's objective of achieving the targets set out in the Childhood Healthy Weight Plan for Darlington. This report, it is about available planning powers to support council objectives in achieving the targets set out in the Childhood Healthy Weight Plan. However, this is a much wider issue and needs to be fully considered and discussed. We could simply plough on and produce, for example, a supplementary planning document, as other councils have done, and this may not be effective, but the key, what we feel, is to work closely with the Director of Public Health and with the Health and Wellbeing Board in order to take advantage of the wide range of expertise available to us to bring forward an evidence-based report to Cabinet. And this report is to gain approval to do just that. I would move this report, the recommendations of the report in paragraph 8 for the reasons shown, paragraph 6 for the reasons shown in paragraph 7. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Is that seconded? Can we have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, you have got a question.
Yes, thank you and good evening, Councillor Scott. I welcome this report to Cabinet as it's something I've been campaigning for since 2014, when a planning application was received for a takeaway on Belvedere Road, a quiet residential part of Park East Ward, a ward which at that time had the highest density of takeaways in the borough and amongst the worst obesity rates and health outcomes too. Residents sent a petition and 35 letters of objection, and our planning committee voted against approval of the Belvedere Road application on 2 separate occasions. However, their decision was overturned on appeal by a planning inspector. The inspector indicated that, and I'll quote, "Whilst it's been put to me that there are other hot food takeaways nearby, I've not been referred to any development plan policy which seeks to restrict the overall concentration of such uses. There is also little substantive evidence before me that would lead me to conclude that the location of the proposal would have a direct correlation with childhood obesity," close quote. So I've spent a little bit of time in preparation for tonight looking at the most recent. I have a question, Chair, but I'd like to give a little bit of background, which I hope you'll find helpful. I've spent a little time looking at
as long as it's brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the most recent stats published by Public Health England in their annual report entitled Fast Food Outlets, Density by Local Authority in England. The average number of takeaways in England is 96.5 per 100,000 population. The Darlington ratio is well above the national average at 148.6 per 100,000. In fact, there were only 3 local authorities in all of England with more takeaways per head of population than Darlington, and they were Blackpool, Scarborough, and Kingston upon Hull.
Councillor Hughes, what is your question?
I'm coming to that, Chair.
Right,
Thank
right,
you.
well,
in 2017, 50.5% of local authorities had a policy specifically targeting takeaway food outlets. So we're not early adopters. There's lots of evidence of good practice and planning policy changes leading to measurable outcomes from which we can learn. One of our near neighbours, Gateshead Borough Council, they were among the first authorities in England to adopt changes such as strategic planning document of this kind. And when they did, they had 22% of year 6s classified as obese In Darlington, we have 22.5% currently. And also Gateshead had 97 hot food takeaways per 100,000. We have 148.6, which is almost a third higher than Gateshead and a third higher than the current national average. So to conclude, I welcome this report and look forward to Cabinet approving the recommendations tonight. I note, however, that over the past year, only half of all of the meetings of the Health and Wellbeing Board have actually taken place. So with this in mind, and also to promote a health in all policies approach as advocated by the UK Local Government Association, I wonder whether Cabinet would consider widening the input at this early exploratory stage beyond planning and health from a silo to a system-wide approach to include at the very least children's services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I have got two people with hands up. Councillor, sorry, I'm getting interruption from somewhere. Councillor Nicholson, and then Councillor Harker, and then Councillor Snetka.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, this report does impact, my area slightly more than Alan, but procedurally it sits with him as a planning issue. I think just in response, firstly, to a comment on Councillor Hughes' comment about the Health and Wellbeing Board not meeting. You know why it's not been meeting as regularly, Councillor Hughes? It's because we've been in a global pandemic, and the services that sit on that panel have been exceptionally stressed in terms of their capacity and resource. We haven't met any less than any other, Tees Valley Health and Wellbeing Board or LA7 Health and Wellbeing Board. It's quite simply because we are there to support our partners who have emergency priorities at the moment. So as the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, we will look at adding these things to the agenda as the relaxation of COVID occurs naturally over the next few months, hopefully. So I hope you don't take the comment of not meeting as a negative. If we could have met more often, we would have done, but we couldn't. But in regards to takeaways in general, from a health perspective, it is a concern that some of our young people, when they're getting into secondary school, are obese. It is a concern for the council, but it's a concern for all of our partners. But it's also something which, ultimately parents need support with as well. It isn't just a council function to be responsible for young people. It's about having access to open space. It's been, having access to healthy food. It's about being educated about that. The location of takeaways, in my view, is more a measure of deprivation than it is about obesity. Your area has 40, Park East has 40 fast food outlets because of the location of where Park East is, whereas Eastbourne has only, my area has only 2. We have the same levels of obesity and deprivation. So we do need to be mindful in the planning process about actually not just headline grabbing and false outrage, but actually being very practical about the solutions. It's very easy to say, let's limit the amount of takeaways, but it's a really, really wider issue. And I think if we, focus on just one thing alone, that would be concerning. And also a big evolution in how people access takeaways is the online platform. I don't generally order takeaways from anywhere within my local area. They come from the other end of town by an app. So actually the location of takeaways is less prevalent now than it's ever been. So, my message to Cabinet and to, people is that we do need to have a really serious conversation about what healthy eating looks like and access to healthy eating, because the old message, and I guess from 2014, Councillor Hughes, when your party was in control, the world has changed. The world has changed quite a lot. So that the narratives that we use and have used from 2014 have changed and will no longer be justifiable, not just to the public, but to planning officers when the challenges come. And that's all I have to say, Councillor Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Harker and then Councillor Snetka.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, clearly it's a very complex and nuanced issue. I think we all probably have quite strong views about it. I'd be interested to know what science there is behind it in terms of us currently understanding the connections between fast food takeaways and obesity. I'm sure it's very complex. My question really is in paragraph 8 in the recommendations, it refers to bringing a report back to Cabinet meeting. I just wonder if Councillor Marshall could give us some indication of timescale. clearly it's a balance between something that does need dealing with, but equally I will fully accept it's a very complex issue and probably does need discussions with many different and diverse groups. But I think nonetheless it would be helpful to have some understanding as to when he hopes to bring something back to Cabinet, because I suspect bringing the report back to Cabinet would only be a first stage, and actually what needs to happen will then be something that then goes forward from that point of the report coming back to Cabinet, because it may involve numerous bodies changing what they do, how they behave, processes, etc. So it could be a very long process, and therefore if this consultation takes a long time, it could be a long time before we actually see any downstream benefits. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Harker. Councillor Snedker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The paragraph 8, I think, as Councillor Harker has already highlighted, is the key point in this report. I've spent the last 2 days at the LGA Childhood Obesity conference and was able to learn some best practice from the Trailblazers programme that had been set up. Unfortunately, that was to a large extent interrupted by COVID, because much of the interventions in childhood obesity do involve contact. It involves working with individuals, with families, with communities, mosques, schools, churches, who knows. And it is painfully complicated and a painfully difficult subject to deal with. But I think this whole systems approach shouldn't be an excuse to obviously duck the issue by a council, and I hope this paper shows how seriously this matter is being taken by the council. Unless we back it with the SPD to give us the flexibility to control fast food takeaways, then we'll be failing as a council. It doesn't mean, putting this in place, that we're going to suddenly close down people's livelihoods, we're going to shut down family businesses. It isn't what it means. What it does, it gives us the flexibility and it gives us the powers to intervene as and when necessary as a caring and appropriate council planning authority to do that. So it isn't a blunt instrument, but it gives us the flexibility and the powers to act in the best interests of people, because childhood obesity does have effect for lifelong health. We know as a council the cost of adult social care. If we don't tackle childhood obesity, that's only going to impact further on that very costly service. And the NHS is spending £1 billion a year on diabetes medication alone. So this is a policy area we need to be involved with, and this document shows that we're getting ready to equip ourselves for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Snedker. Councillor Curry.
Thank you. I welcome the fact that we're looking to try and tackle this issue. I know we have policies of putting new premises, takeaway premises near secondary schools. It's not been included for primary schools, but this is probably where it starts. The want to eat stuff from takeaway shops. Is there any possibility that at some point we will be looking to review and have a look at the impact it will have on older people? I have known of instances, I don't think the people I know knew that were doing this, but they lived on a very low income. They were in a village state and they could not get to a shop, so they had takeaways every meal. So is it possible that we could review the possible impact on older people at some time that may be on tight incomes, and that is their only means of getting a hot meal?
Thank you, Councillor Curry. I can't see any more hands up. So, Councillor Marshall, would you like to reply to the questions?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, not in the order that they came, but I agree with Councillor Harker that this is a complex issue, and which is why it's important we take as much reference from experts as we can. And also to Councillor Snedker, the whole system approach is absolutely key, which is in paragraph 8, and I think we've recognised that. Going back to Councillor Harker's question about timescales, Councillor Harker, I can't sit here and give you a timescale. It's obviously an important issue. It's come to Cabinet. We need to get the process underway, and it needs to get underway as soon as possible. And I cannot give you a timescale, unfortunately. And Councillor Curry, we've already said in the introduction that this is a wide issue, and I'm sure as we talk to the directors of public health and the Health and Wellbeing Board, the questions about adult obesity are looked at. However, this particular report is about child obesity, and I think it's well recognised that if you can cut down children eating unhealthy foods, it falls through into the adult phase anyway. So I think children is where the emphasis has to be. With regards to Councillor Hughes, thanks for your information. I can say that Gateshead's supplementary planning document is one of the ones that I have referenced, Councillor Hughes, and I've noted all of the things that they have in there and all the stats by ward and everything else, and that's excellent. And we will be looking at other areas of good practice. With regards to widening the input beyond planning and health and including social services, I think the fact that the Health and Wellbeing Board includes people from social services answers that question in itself. And this will be a wide-ranging report, I expect. And I hope when we do get through to it, it will answer all the questions you raised. And I'm really pleased to note that you're enthusiastic and support this move. And whilst I don't agree with the stats that I have about the density of takeaway businesses, national average and Darlington's average are different to yours, Councillor Hughes. It is a fact that ours is well above that national average, and it's interesting that that figure's been reached during the years of a Labour control. So everybody's keen now that we do something, but it seems that we did very little under all those years of Labour control. But that being said, it is an important issue, and we will get this underway and an evidence-based report brought back to Cabinet. And therefore, as I say, I've moved the recommendation for the reasons, and I think it's been seconded. So over to you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marshall. As Councillor Marshall says, it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? I have an agreement. Thank you. The next item is Councillor Johnson, regulatory investigatory powers.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that from the October 2020 Cabinet report, the Council had a periodic inspection last autumn. A number of observations and suggested changes were made about our RIPA policy for us to consider. These are set out in paragraph 8 of Appendix 1 of the report. As well as dealing with these matters, the policy has also been amended to reflect staff retirements and changes to the senior management, with appropriate changes being made to the senior responsible officer and the authorising officers. Given the go-live date of the new senior management structure, it is proposed that the revised policy will come into force on the 1st of June 2021. The full policy is set out in Appendix 1. I move the recommendations in paragraph 6 of the report for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Councillor Johnson? I can't see any hands up, so is that agreed? Thank you. Item number 10, schedules of transactions. There's obviously a part 3 item attached to this. Does anybody have any questions on part 3? Because if we do, we would have to move into part 3. No, nobody has any questions. So we'll deal with both the part 1 and part 3 items together. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see the momentum continuing with the purchase of the properties around Bonomi Way to suit the Rail Heritage Project 2025. And also the purchase of the iconic building at the junction of Crown Street and Priestgate, which will support the town centre strategy. I move the report as recommended in paragraph 3 for the reasons given in paragraph 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the report? No, I can't see anybody's hands up. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item number 11, membership changes. Are there any membership changes from anybody? No, can't see anything. We have no supplementary items. Item 13, questions. Are there any questions? I can't see any hands up. So thank you very much indeed for your attendance, everybody, and good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you and goodbye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank